fun stuff this morning. So even if you've seen this before, I think you'll find that there's new and fresh data in here. In terms of the ground rules, we're going to go for about 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, depending on how quick I go. And then we'll have plenty of time for discussion, Q&A, go all the way up through the full hour if you want to do it, for anyone who wants to stick around. But I won't be taking questions during the presentation itself. And then, yes, I saw that question. And listen, the way to stay in touch with us is NDN. If you go to the NDN site, there's a newsletter you can sign up for. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on YouTube. Those 3 ways are the best way to stay in touch. I'm also on Post and some other places, but just in terms of NDN newsletter, NDN site, Twitter, and YouTube. But let's get going. This presentation, the core of this presentation is really about our politics since 1989. It's the premise of our presentation that to understand American politics today, that you have to look at what's happened to the country since the Cold War ended. A whole new age began. Global politics, domestic politics, global economy, domestic economy has gone through enormous changes. And what we try to do in this presentation is really look at US politics since this epic event in 1989, where the world became not just a sort of the Western democracy and but the entire world. And it's our view that it's important to recognize just how much things have changed since 1989. This is just my list. Everyone can develop their own list. There have been really dramatic changes, and managing against change is one of the biggest challenges that any leaders have. And it's part of what we're going to do today is talk about and look at American politics through the lens of how have the two parties managed against this change. And this is really at the core of what we're going to talk about today. And what we find by going into the data is that one party has managed against change well, and the other hasn't. And this is the most basic measure of performance. During this period, there have been 18 years of Democratic presidents, 16 years of Republican presidents, so fairly equal, right, as we look at the data. And you see that Democrats have repeatedly, had significant growth and job growth on their watch. The Republicans haven't. Trump was the first president since Hoover to have had net job loss on his watch in his first term. When I began this deck, we had the slide was this 1 point, it was actually higher. It was up, 4 or 5 million of Republicans and then 33 million here. And part of what we were saying was, the Democrats had done really well with job creation, Republicans not so well. But adding the Trump presidency, adding the first 2 years of Biden, what you see is that in the 16 years of the Bushes and Trump and the 16 years of Clinton and Obama, the Democrats created 17 times more jobs than the Republicans, and Biden has created 5 times as many jobs as these 3 Republicans in just 2 years, right? So the scale of the performance of this is pretty simple stuff, right? Democrats have done a good job, Republicans haven't. This is to help. This is one of my favorite slides, and this is a slide that's been picked up in various forums by other people, including the White House. And is that the Republicans have only averaged 10,000 jobs a month over 16 years. We had 223,000 jobs last month in an economy that was slowing. That would be more than a year of job creation of the 3 Republicans. And so you're seeing not only have Democrats, made things work, done their part. Republicans have repeatedly failed to do their part in America. It's not just, it's that one party's done well, the other party has not carried their weight in managing the country in a time of enormous transformation. This is the unemployment rate, another way of cutting the data, right? You've seen it drop significantly under Democrats. It's gone up repeatedly under Republicans. And then this is the slide that I think really sums up, to me, if I could pick out one slide in this whole deck, is that there have been 47 million jobs created in America since this age of globalization began. 45 million of them have been created under Democratic presidents, basically all of them, right? And this is how so, this is the story, and we're going to keep going deeper into it now the rest of the way. GDP growth tells a similar story, right? We had very good GDP numbers today, 2.9%. We didn't update this, but that would probably drop Biden's number down to 3.3 or 3.2, but still, 3 times what it was under Trump and significantly higher than either of the two Republican presidents. And we also know that during this period, something very dramatic has happened, which is that the country has gotten much, much wealthier. We've seen an explosion of wealth created through the stock market that's unprecedented in our history. And this is an important sign because one of Trump's core arguments was that America was falling behind and in decline during this age of globalization, when in fact the opposite is true. We've probably created more wealth in this period than any other analogous period in our history. And not surprisingly, much of that wealth has been created under Democratic presidencies. But look at this. We've seen a long boom here. I mean, this is an extraordinary run of the stock market, right? I mean, we're 16 times, the Dow is 16 times what it was in 1989 when Bush was elected president. This is an extraordinary and historic era of wealth creation. And as I said, most of it has happened under Democratic presidents. Biden's got a little work to do. He's got 2 more years. Let's see how he does. He may have 6 more years, right? He's got time to get that number up and in the future. But you can again see most of the wealth that's been created in America during this period has happened under Democratic administrations. Well, how have the American people done in all this, right? That's obviously not just what Democrats care about is not just wealth that's been created, but it's distribution of that wealth. And we've seen, over this long period that people have gotten ahead. I mean, they're doing better than they were. There is some kind of broad myth in our political discourse that people have been falling behind or there's been American carnage during this period. And it just isn't true. I mean, we are doing better. And obviously, the gains that workers have made haven't matched the 16x gains in the Dow, right? But they have gotten ahead, and we need to recognize that. And this is median income over time, blue is Democrat, red is Republican. And again, you've seen, and under Democratic presidents, we've seen significant gains, and under Republicans, not so much. I put this slide up because one of the things you often hear in the discussion around incomes is that incomes or wages have been flat for 30 years, 40 years. People use different time periods. And that's just not true. It's not true, and this is not a flat line. And claiming that there's been sort of a static, there's been no growth, it actually distorts what's happened under Democratic presidents, right? It doesn't give us credit for the fact that we've been able to advance workers. Republicans have struggled to do so. And I realize there's a slide missing here, which is another version of this, on looking at median earnings, which tells a similar story. And the story is that people are better off today than they were, but not nearly as much as we want or need, and certainly not nearly as much relative to people who held equities, who've seen their wealth skyrocket during this period. We're about to have a big fiscal debate, and this is an area that we need to be on offense about, because Republicans have not only brought 3 consecutive recessions, but they've also brought spiraling deficits. And Trump may have the worst fiscal record of any president in American history. I just put this out there because this is the deficit as a percentage of GDP, which to me is the best way of looking at this. And you can see what happened. This is Clinton, right? We got to surplus under Clinton. This is what happened with Bush. And this is what happened with Trump. I put this out here because I just want you to see just how extraordinary the debt that Trump created was, right? During a peacetime economy, completely out of proportion to anything that we had seen over the last, since World War II. And it's why the Republicans' arguments that they're making about fiscal responsibility are just so preposterous, right? On its face. I mean, this is another way of cutting it. This is the change in the deficit as a percentage of GDP over these last 6 presidencies. And you can see that the deficit went way down under Democratic presidents, and it went up under Republican presidents, went way up under Trump. And it's as if the Republicans don't know any of this, right? I mean, we've been the party of fiscal responsibility. They've been the party of fiscal recklessness, right? Particularly under Trump. And so we shouldn't shy away from this fiscal argument that we're about to have. And we do have work to do to help people understand what has actually happened, as opposed to sort of the conventional wisdom about the 2 parties. The deficit went up every year of Trump's presidency, and it went down. It's gone down every year of Biden's presidency, right? And also we know that in terms of raising the debt ceiling, it's been raised far more often under Republican presidents than Democratic presidents. So, we've got to go on offense on this fiscal debate. We need to win it. The Republican arguments are ridiculous, and we have to really lean into this very hard. I tweeted about this morning. The basic economic narrative that you're hearing come from the Republicans is that, hey, man, we shouldn't be spending all this money in Ukraine. We should be spending it here at home. When Democrats say, well, look, we just passed the biggest expansion of domestic investment that we've had in 50 years. We are spending it here at home, right? And then the Republicans answer that, of course, as well, we have to cut all that, right? So, the ridiculousn's of their arguments, which is why Democrats need to lean into this economic debate and win it in the coming months. There's no coherence behind what they're arguing, and we have a very strong track record to run on. And let's spend little bit of time. This is a new section, sort of building on the success of the Biden presidency. I want to go through some data really quickly here. First of all, we've had the strongest recovery of any of the advanced economies in the world during the COVID period. And you can see relative to some of our allies, it's substantially better. We have the lowest peacetime unemployment rate now since World War II. If you look at this is the unemployment rate. You can see there's been only really 2 periods that have gotten close to this. This is during the Vietnam War. This is during the Korean War, right? So those were wartime low unemployment rates. This is the lowest we've just recently, the lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II, and the lowest in 50 years, right? Pretty remarkable achievement by Joe Biden. We also know that the uninsured rate is the lowest that it's ever been in American history. And this is directly due to our work, and everybody knows this was opposed viciously by the Republicans at every step of the way. It's an amazing societal achievement, disproportionately benefiting Black and Hispanic Americans. One of my favorite stats from this presentation is this one, which is new business starts, which is a sign of health and vitality of the economy, have remained at a very, very high level during the Biden presidency. This is incredibly encouraging. Lots of an explosion of entrepreneurship in the United States. This is why the can-do spirit in America is so alive and well. And during a time of enormous crisis, people didn't retreat. They put their head down, they went to work, they built new businesses. The economy is stronger and better for it. We also know that even though inflation's been too high, and we know that, that wages have also been at a very high historic level. And we now know that in 2022, real earnings were actually positive. And that's because wages were so high. This whole inflation conversation over the last year has been almost completely without a discussion of what was happening on wages. And I have taken some criticism for this because I've argued that, frankly, inflation was not as punishing to American workers as many represented, because many workers were seeing huge increases in their wages and their pay, and particularly in the bottom 50%, right? And so this has been also something that's been a huge achievement in the Biden era. And in fact, when you look at deposits, this is also from Steve Ratner. He just released this yesterday. People have more cash in the bank now than they've had in a very long time, and this is another sign of strength. This is the cash. The bottom 50% is now, 4 times what it was a decade ago. That's in part because they are getting paid more. People are making more money and they're not unemployed, right? We have a very low unemployment rate. They also have subsidized health insurance. They also have, the child tax credit and other things the government did. This is again a sign. This is one of the reasons I think Democrats did much better in the election than people expected, because the Republicans were exaggerating the impact of inflation on American workers, in my view. And this is something I've been very vociferous about over the last year, that the cries around inflation and that was going to be the dominant issue in the election obviously did not prove to be true. We have the most number of job openings per unemployed people in America since this was started to be measured, right? We have 2 job openings for every unemployed person. The trade deficit has come way down in recent months, really exciting thing, something that Donald Trump said he was going to do and was never able to do during his presidency. We also know that on other measures of health of our society, right, crime, despite the rhetoric around crime, crime is a fraction of what it was a generation ago. This is an incredible societal achievement. We should all be very proud of this. And we also know that in another area that we'll be directly engaging the Republicans on, that crude oil production in 2023 will be the highest in American history. So this notion that somehow Biden has dismantled American domestic energy production is just, it's red wavy and it's falseness, and it's something that we have to continue to reject. On immigration, which is another area that we'll be debating heartily in the coming months, really important to understand is that Democrats have never been for an open border. The number of undocumented immigrants in the country under Obama and Biden actually dropped significantly during their presidencies, and we got the border under control. What's happening now is we can have a whole separate conversation about that. Happy to do in the Q&A. Biden, I think, has now come out with a very strong and forceful and thoughtful approach. Let's have this debate about the border and immigration, because as I just went through, right, look at how well we're doing in the economy, right? We've done so well. Things are, by historic measures, right, we're in very strong shape. And let's just review some of this, right? Incredible achievements in the United States, right? There's an argument that we are doing better today than we ever have. And particularly because data going back prior to the 1960s is an economy that didn't involve women and people of color. I mean, we've seen all of this progress in the American economy in a time when the circle of opportunity has been widened to Americans in a way that it's never been before. And I'm really proud of this. And this is something we should be very proud of, because this is the main work of the Democratic Party over the last generation. And Trump's central argument was that all the immigrants that we let into the country had actually put America into decline. What I'm showing you is that during a period of incredible migration, we've seen enormous progress. And that's why what's really important to recognize is that the fundamental argument about immigration, that Trump had made is just so patently false. America may be stronger today, and I think it's stronger than it's ever been. And I think it's because of immigrants, not despite them, right? This is an important thing. Democrats have no reason not to lean into this debate on the border and immigration with all that we got. And the data on this has been really interesting. You can cut this data in a variety of ways, but during the Trump presidency, the country became more pro-immigrant and more pro-immigration by many different measures. And I think it's when people were forced to really think about it, they came down in the right place, right? This is one cut of the data. I could show you lots of data on this. There just isn't even in this last election, in the midterm election, on the question of, is immigration or immigrants good or bad, basically. It was 53 good, 39 bad. Those numbers are very consistent over time, right? We also know that in the Democratic coalition, anyway, there isn't a big objection to globalization. I think that our electorate is younger, it's more immigrant, it's more used to being connected to the outside world. We have a very open and sort of traditionally liberal approach as Democrats to these matters. And so by so many measures, life is better today than it's been in a long time, perhaps ever, right? We've made tremendous progress as a country. And as I showed you, that progress is almost entirely due to the work of the Democrats. But our success as a party has not just been in governing, it's also been in politics. And let's start with this, which is that this is kind of a remarkable set of statistics. When I worked for Bill Clinton in 1992, we had lost 4 out of the 5 previous presidential elections, 2 of them by historically large margins. And the work of the Clinton people, and the people around Bill Clinton, the New Democrats, was to make us competitive at a presidential level again. And in all these elections since 1989, Democrats have won the popular vote 7 out of 8 times. No American political party has done that in American history, right? This is the strongest popular vote run that any party has ever had in American history. And obviously, I've been very involved in this and very proud of this. What's important to recognize is even though the Republicans have 6 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices, they've only broken 48% in a presidential election once since the 1980s, right? This has been, if I like to hear people argue it's a center-right country, there's just no data to back that up. This is party ID over time, right? This also shows that historically, during most of this period, The country saw Democrats as being better than Republicans or had more affiliation with the Democratic Party during this time. And I think if you put my theory to the test here, which is that people who grew up after Reagan, who grew up after 1989, who became politically aware, what they saw was an America with 3 good Democratic presidents and 3 not so good Republican presidents, which is very different than older Americans whose narrative was really about the once great Democratic Party falling apart, Reagan coming in as a knight on a white horse and saving the country. And so older Americans had a very different narrative and a different experience of the two parties than younger Americans had. And if I'm right, then we should see some kind of structural advantage with Democrats with under 45-year-old voters. And we do. There has developed under 45-year-old voters used to be a swing group in American politics, as you can see during the Bush era. It isn't anymore. And in this last election in 2022, under 45-year-old voters went somewhere between 13 and 20 points, depending on the exit polls that we have, which would put us, in that upper end of this realm. Remember, Biden did better with under 45-year-old voters than Obama did, right? This has become a structural advantage for the Democratic Party. This is a big deal. These are big margins. All of our margins of victory come from younger voters. And this is now 18 to 29-year-olds, right, who went between 28 and 35% towards the Democrats, which would put it at the very upper end of this realm. And so even with Joe Biden as president, an older president, we're getting in the upper reaches of possibility with 18 to 29-year-olds, which shows that this is a structural thing. This is a big problem for the Republican Party because these younger voters are going to increasingly become a bigger part of the electorate over time. And it's not true that people are liberal when they're young and more conservative when they get old. People develop voting habits and orientations when they're young, and they often stick with them through the rest of their lives. And so this is a huge structural advantage for Democrats. And it's because we've been a good party. We've governed well. And the life experience of Americans is that we've been better than Republicans, which is true, right? And so despite all the success that we've had, we still got work to do in winning the economic argument. We are underperforming on economic issues, despite everything that I just showed you. And this should be a central job of the party in the coming year. This is Biden, exit polls, AP Votecast. We won the election because he won voters over on the most important issue of that election, COVID. But look at his numbers among economy and jobs, right? Trump crushed him on people who said the economy and jobs was their number one issue. And even on this simple, basic question in 2020, who's better able to handle the economy, despite Trump having lost jobs and left a huge recession in 2020, Trump beat him. So Biden enters the White House with sort of a structural challenge on economic issues, which has maintained and continued throughout his whole presidency. I mean, this is June of 2021. You can see the huge differences between the perception of Biden on COVID and on healthcare. This is before inflation really started kicking in, right? So this isn't inflation related. I mean, this was structural. This was there in his campaign. It was there evident in the early part of the year. And this is brand new data just this week, right, from Navigator, where Biden is now minus 13 on the economy. He's doing a little bit better, but that's, substantially below his job approval, right? So, and look at this, Hispanic voters, he's in negative territory on the economy, right? This is a warning sign for Democrats as we head into 2024. And also, if you look here, this is also brand new data just this week. Among independent voters, we're minus 11 on jobs in the economy. We're minus 14 on economic stability, minus 18 on inflation. We can't get done what we want to get done as a national party if we're in negative territory on such an important issue. And particularly given how well we've performed over such a long period of time, we've got to fix this year. This, to me, is an urgent priority as we head into this new year. And so let me end with this. Let me offer some final concluding thoughts about the political moment that we're all in. So first of all, I began this presentation because when you see this data, you realize that this sort of left-right construct that is so dominant in our daily discourse is just absurd. And we have to do far more to challenge it every day than we do. to me, left-right is red wavy, right? It's a meme created by the right to sort of obscure the fundamental truth of our politics, which is there's been one party that's governed well and another that hasn't. And we're not the same. And we have to reject any of these efforts to create symmetry between the experience of the two parties over this period of time. And certainly the American people don't see us as the same. I mean, even if you look at polling. I also think that as we go forward this year, our party is being called again. After World War II, we built the modern world that we know today, the global liberal order, Pax Americana, whatever the words are you want to describe it. I think we have to recognize that the world is coming through now another collective trauma, and that we have an opportunity to use this moment to revitalize the global liberal order and to lead lead the world once again in the big challenges that are in front of us. This is a big moment. This is not just a domestic moment. This is not FDR 33. To me, this is a moment much more like FDR 44, 41 through 45. And we're being called again, I think, as a party to lead the world to a period of peace and prosperity. It's amazing to me how often I think about this speech that FDR gave in 1941 and how much it is foundational for the entire world today, but how foundational it is for the Democratic Party, right? This world that was built after World War II that has created more peace and prosperity than probably any time in human history was something that we built, right? This is something that we did. And it was built around freedom. And this is really important given what's happening with the modern, with MAGA and their dalliance with authoritarian politics here in the US. This is an amazing speech, and one that if you haven't spent time with recently, I would go back and do it, because it is probably the most important speech ever given by a Democrat in our history. But it also is the basis of the world that we know today. And we need to use it to understand where we're going. We have to understand where we've been and the foundation of it. And the world that FDR built and imagined and that we built as a party is a world, as I said, has created more peace, more opportunity for regular people than any other political system in world history. This is a golden age to be alive in human history. There's never been a time when so many people have done so well and could do so much. We've seen, poverty plummet. We've seen trade explode, right? We've seen far more people living in democracies than ever before. This has been a remarkable age, and this is something that we did, everybody. We have to be really aware of it, which is why preserving it, fighting for it, revitalizing it, modernizing it should be so central to our work in the coming years. And even something every time I look at this slide kind of blows me away. I mean, look at the difference of the world that we built, right? I mean, how the life expectancy at the end of World War II was 45 years. We're living now again in a golden age. And I'm so proud that our party was so instrumental in creating these opportunities for the people of the world today. And I think it's really important as we go forward and we reflect on this moment, just to step back and just lean and to understand the extraordinary legacy of the party that we're all part of here. We've done a lot of good, folks. And as I argue, I don't think any organized political force has done more good for the people of the world than the Democratic Party has over the last 80 years. This is an amazing set of things that we've done. And obviously we still have a lot more to do, but I'm so proud of this. And the contrast between, if part of the goal of this presentation is to help us establish this fundamental contrast between a party that's done good and a party that hasn't done its part, we have to recognize that. Let's look at the Republican version of this, right? I used to not have this slide in this deck because I just wanted to sort of settle on the idea that Republicans had not done their part. But we now know that that's not really true anymore, that there's a malevolence that's crept into their politics, something that we have to just be honest and forthright about. It's not just that they haven't done their part, because they're actively trying to weaken America, weaken democracy, siding with authoritarian impulses and interests all around the world. We've got a lot of work to do here, folks, and we have to be, if part of our job is to be truthful to our friends and family who are in this daily discourse with us, we have to be honest about what's happened to MAGA and the Republicans during this time. And I think it's really important when you hear people talk about the things that have gone wrong in America and what's gone right, right? A lot of what's gone right has happened during our watch and when we've been in power. I'm very proud of this. I mean, there have been this idea that almost all the jobs created since 1989 have been created in our democratic watch, under the Democratic watch, is so important, because when you think about what's gone wrong, Washington isn't broken, our politics aren't broken, right? The Republican Party is what's broken, and we have to be honest about this if we're going to find a solution forward. And if you need any reminders of how broken and malevolent they become, right, let me share a few with you. Thanks, everybody. Join me in being loud and proud about this remarkable party that we have been part of in every way possible. I'd rather be us than them. Remember, with Democrats, things get better. Help me tell this story. Thanks all. Let's open it up for Q&A. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. Okay, so I'm going to take questions in the ways that we take questions on Zoom, right? Stu is here. Let me, Stu raised his hand, so I'm going to Stu, jump in here. Hey, Stu. I think you can speak, Stu. Let me try. Oh, okay, Stu, go ahead. I may be screwing this up. Stu, I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah, can you hear me, Simon?
Yeah. Go
okay.
ahead.
Thank you very much, Simon. Just a few points. This is, I agree with you. Our parallel is to World War II, and I'm thinking. I volunteer a lot. I get overwhelmed with where to spend and scattered with where to spend my time. Although I do spend it. I think we need to have a coordinated effort in our politics, the Democratic politics today, as if the metaphor being what Eisenhower did with D-Day. I follow you, I follow Joe Trippi, I follow the Lincoln Project. We have a lot of great people, but I feel like there's a lot going on, but it's not landing on one beach. Okay. And my wish, so that's just a wish that I have, that there be some way that you guys coordinate and mobilize us as an army.
Yeah, well, Stu, first of all, thank you. And I know you've been tweeting my stuff out a lot on Twitter, so thanks for the support, and it's great to connect with you in this way. So I'm gonna take you off here and just and go back into our, here we go. Yeah, there's me. But anyway, Stu, thank you. So a couple points. One is, listen, I think that, first of all, this work has been well received in the White House, and the president's giving a major economic speech today. And I do think that we now have really powerful tools to make this argument and to win it. I think the Republicans are already creating an enormous opportunity for contrast. And I think part of what I'm trying to do in my work is to make this idea that we have to be louder, that we have to become information warriors every day, that they are very loud. They're very networked and amplified. They're able to move these ridiculous memes like fentanyl in Halloween candy and CRT and inflation, recession, all the screaming that they do, right? Their party has basically become a party where they jump up and down and wave their arms in the air and, scream about the leftists in this country. And but it works. And it actually is, they have the ability to bully the national media into sort of dealing with their crazy arguments. Red wave. I mean, I fought the red wave, but the red wave problem is with virtually all of our discourse. How do we solve that? How do we manage that? I think there are a couple things. One is we have to get much more intentional about winning arguments and not moving messages. I think there's a big difference. I'm not a big fan of the concept of message. Because message feels ephemeral. It feels like it's something that comes and goes. Arguments are things that you do over time. the Republicans make arguments. We have to make our arguments. That's part of what this deck is about. I'm helping give you tools to make a big argument about the country, about the economy, about our party, right? That we have to make over time. And so first of all, I think we have to understand that we're in a big argument with MAGA and the Republicans, and they view it that way, and we have to view it that way. The second thing is they're louder than we are in that argument. And I had this event last week, Stu, that you referenced with Joe Trippi, his new group, Resolute Square, Courier Newsroom, Deep State Radio, and the Minus Touch guys, to showcase organizations that I think were doing a really good job at helping us be louder and more effective. But I think we all have a role to play in this. I think we all have to view ourselves as being information warriors. I think the way in the next 2 years that we get really loud is by all of us becoming more intentional about being part of this debate every day, being in the information war, right? I was in the war room 30 years ago, and I joke that the way that we think of the war room is, 20 young, sweaty kids drinking Red Bulls, producing videos. We have to think of the war room now as 4 million patriots, proud patriots going to work and trying to drown out the right-wing noise machine on their side, doing the research, understanding the data, making the arguments to your friends. Many of you do that through door knocking and texting and postcard writing, but we also have to do it daily in the daily war, right? They are operating 24/7, 365. We need to too. And even if you reach 10 people a day, 4 million people reaching 10 people a day is an awful lot of people. And so don't view it as being a waste or throwing a pebble into a pond. I mean, it's if all of us commit to being in this information war, I think we can make a big difference. Third, final point is that I think that I want you to be an information warrior, but to be conscious of putting more positive sentiment into our discourse. I become very convinced in my work over the last few years that the central goal of Greater MAGA is to put negative sentiment into our discourse, to make us feel less good about ourselves, about our leaders, about our democracy, about our president, about each other, about everything. They want us to feel bad about this place called America and the things that we do and each other. Well, one of the ways we defeat them is by staying positive and putting positive sentiment into the discourse every day, and by responding to their pessimism with hopium, right? Or data-filled arguments, however you want to call it, optimism, patriotism, all these words that we use, freedom, to drive the discourse. Because I think we're at our best as Democrats when we're hopeful and optimistic about the future. They're the party of pessimism. We should be the party of optimism. And I think we have to become far more intentional. I will tell you, it's changed the way that I use Twitter, for example. I mean, I'm spending far less time criticizing them and spending far more time talking about the virtue of our enterprise. I think we all need to do that. It doesn't mean we ignore them, but we also don't need to spread their negativity and their pessimism for them. They can do that. We need to spend our time spreading more positive sentiment in our discourse. So that's a long answer, Stu, to what you're saying. And in terms of just how you spend your time, whatever you do, just do more of it, right? There's not a good or a bad, right? However you feel comfortable being a citizen, proud, big citizen, proud patriot, just do more of it in the next couple of years. Our work is clearly not done, as we're seeing with the MAGA-infused House Republican leadership. We still have a lot of work to do. We did really good in the election, everybody, right? This was a very good election for us, but we still have much more to do. And in terms of money, right, I still think that I will always argue that the marginal dollar goes furthest in House races outside the presidential battleground or House races in general. I mean, the Senate races have been raising so much money recently, and they're going to need money, and all of you should not give. But if you've got marginal dollars, that it goes further in House races, particularly in House races outside the battleground. Let me go to the written Q&A, and because we've had a lot of questions here. So, Larry asked a question that I want to address because it's going to be something I'm going to be talking about more in the coming months, which is how do we get out of this static place where it's like 50-50 and God, if we lose 2 Senate seats, then, we're in trouble. How do we break out of that, right? How do we get to 55%, not 51 or 52? And I think there's 2 areas that we're let's say, four areas that we have to really think about in the coming months. One is our margins with young voters is so huge that we simply have to create far more young voters. Excuse me. We have to spend a lot of money to get youth turnout up. We just have to do it. It probably is the most important thing we could do demographically in the next 2 years. Two is we have to regain some of the lost ground with Hispanic voters. We've lost a little bit, but a little bit can matter. I mean, the good news is that we did very well in the heavily Hispanic parts of the country, in the western parts of the US. We didn't do so well in Florida, but we did very well in Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, even in the Rio Grande Valley. But we've lost a little ground. We have to reclaim it. That's important because Hispanic voters are in very important states that determine control of the House and the Senate and the presidency. So we need to do better there and get back to a better number. Third is we've got to, I think, come into some formal alliance with the Never-Trumpers and the anti-MAGA Republicans. The Never-Trumpers, people like Bill Kristol and Liz Cheney, played a huge role in this last election. They were critical in creating a permission structure for Republicans who were not MAGA to vote Democrat or not vote at all. And we need to get more intentional about that. We need to create a broader coalition. I mean, if we were in a parliamentary democracy, Liz Cheney would have been in our cabinet by now, and we would have created some kind of formal alliance with the Never-Trumpers. They would have been their own political party, and they would have brought into our coalition. We can't really do that in our system, but we need to get as close to that as we can. And then finally, I think that the issue around abortion and reproductive rights is an area that I think is going to continue to drive politics in the coming years. I think there are many independent and Republican women, in particular, younger independent Republican women who may be much more open to us than in the past. And we've got to be very intentional about reaching out in that way. So I think there's work we can do to build on our three consecutive strong performances in the last three elections and get out of this sort of stasis that we're in and build a broader, more durable anti-MAGA majority that will deny them power, but and hopefully start to loosen the grip of MAGA over the Republican Party, which I think has to be one of our central goals. Peter asked, what was the name of the FDR speech you mentioned? It was his State of the Union speech in 1941, where he laid out the four freedoms. There isn't video of it, but there's audio of it. You can listen to it. And certainly it's very easy to go to pull up the text. That, just so everybody knows, the four freedoms became the foundational orientation of the United Nations. Those four freedoms, FDR's four freedoms, are baked into the Charter of the United Nations and became the organizing principle of the entire global order after World War II. And so it is really, and again, for all the talk now about freedom, about patriotism in the Democratic Party and Republicans taking away rights and us championing freedom, freedom is the core foundational value of our party. And it was laid out by FDR in 1941. And it's something that should continue to animate us. And I go back, a couple of weeks ago, I took a walk on the Mall. I hadn't done that in a while. It was a warm winter day here. I started the Lincoln Memorial and I walked my way around the Mall, and I spent time at the FDR Memorial, which I'd been to before, but I had not spent as much time as I did there. And, I think that, for those of you in DC, if you haven't been there in a while, go visit. It's very inspirational. It's a remarkable monument in the way it's laid out. It's very much based on his words. And FDR really is the architect of the modern world and our party and our values. And what FDR's values were very sort of classically liberal, right? Based around freedom. And I consider myself far more liberal than progressive in many ways, in the way that people know the differences in those terms. And FDR, I think, ended his presidency as one of the greatest liberals in human history, certainly perhaps the most consequential one. Anyway, there's so many other questions. Let me just see if I can pull. I don't answer questions from anonymous attendees, by the way, just if you want to write your name, people who've, Robert asks, great presentation. What I don't want to be lost, maybe you can remind your followers how big and long the bills are that Democratic passed last August and their lasting effect on the economy. Yeah, listen, I don't really, it's interesting you say that. This presentation, which I was literally working on up until we went live, was, I shortchanged a little bit the three big bills that Biden did. I mean, historically, this presentation existed prior to Biden. So I've kind of resisted making this about the Biden presidency. But we need to do that now because the debate, the economic debate we're about to have is very consequential. And I want to help all of you who want to be info warriors in that debate get armed, because I do think that the way the economy has been discussed has been very red wavy, right? Meaning that the Republican memes around recession, inflation have dominated. Things around all the positive stuff I've just shown you has been largely absent from the discourse. And we have to right the ship here a little bit. And I think certainly, Biden is deeply aware of all this. But we really have no choice as a party other than to try now to go and win this debate. I've given you data. All the stuff's on my website. Not every slide, but big chunks of it are. I don't release the deck, right? If you want to get connected to this data, there's a lot of stuff you can read on our site and watch the presentation. But I think that we have no choice now other than to have a goal, a strategic goal of defeating the Republicans on the economy this year. We have to do it. They've begun a big economic and fiscal debate. So let's do it, baby, right? And I'm confident that if we lean in, we go in, we can come out the other end. Really, we have a better argument than they do. We've been far better for the economy. Many of their arguments, as I showed to you, are comical and ridiculous and things that, I would love to debate them on television on all these things, right? I did thousands of appearances on Fox News over a long period of time, debated all of these things. I would love to be in this economic debate with them right now on Fox News, because I think we can crush them, and the goal should be to crush them, right? Because the arguments they're making are absurd and ridiculous, and the American people deserve far better than what they're being given by the House Republicans right now. But Robert, the point is, yes, I've gone through all this and I barely even mentioned the thing that is going to be so consequential in the next 2 years, which is the CHIPS bill, the infrastructure bill, the climate bill are going to become far more visible in our lives in the next 2 years. And this is going to be even a more powerful set of things that we can run on and use in the daily discourse. I think they're still abstract to many people, which is why I actually don't talk about them that much in this presentation. What I showed you was all publicly available data about what's happening to the economy right now, not stuff that's going to happen. I think we have enough about what's happening right now to win the economic argument. 6 months from now, we may even have more powerful tools to do so, which is why I'm so optimistic that if we lean in here, we can come out in the right place. And there's a basic rule here in debating, right? Which is, you can't score unless you shoot. You can't win the debate unless you make the arguments. You can't expect the American people to know things unless you tell them. And we have to become more intentional, I think, about winning the daily information war, being louder, and particularly around economic issues. This is an area of clear, strategic, broad party underperformance, which we have to fix in the coming months. And I think we can. But thank you, Robert. And I know you engage me a lot on Twitter, and I appreciate that. Yeah, Heidi talks about the border debate. I'm going to be releasing some stuff on that. I've worked on these issues. I've spent a long time working on immigration border issues at a policy level. Again, like many of the other arguments they make about the economy, their arguments about the border and immigration are largely ridiculous. And again, if we lean in, have a serious debate over time, I'm confident that we can win it. We're on immigration right now on the border. We're actually in negative territory. That hasn't been very common in the modern era. We have to fix that. They're the party that wants to just demagogue and without proposing any real solutions on the border. The Republicans can't come up with a unified plan in the House. They're very divided on the issue, from sort of a handful of pragmatic Republicans who want to actually fix the things that are going on there. But to be very clear, I mean, what's happening on the border is part of a huge change that's happened in the region. I'm not going to go into it now. I write about this. I talk about this quite a bit. But all I'll say is that we shouldn't be scared of this debate. We've done a good job, and we can win this debate because we actually have better ideas and we actually understand what's happening. But you can't win a debate if you don't engage, right? And I think that Biden, on the immigration border issues, he had a lot of other stuff that he got done in the last 2 years. There's a lot of room now, and you're already seeing him talk about this in a very intelligent and thoughtful way. The plan they rolled out prior to him going to Mexico, I fully support. I know there are some in our family that don't like it, but I'm behind it. I think it's a pragmatic solution given the changing legal environment that we're all operating in. It would be better if Congress passed legislation. I think we need to do that. I'm not a huge optimist about that. We can't give up. But Biden's dealing with a problem in front of him in a pragmatic way. He deserves a lot of credit for that, in my view. And you notice Republicans have been far less quiet, far less noisy about the border in recent weeks than they were prior to Biden offering that plan, because on some levels they know it's actually been effective already. Let me see if I can grab a couple more here. Melissa asks, can you share the deck? I'm going to figure out a way to release more of this stuff. I mean, the most important slides are on our site. I mean, it's all there. You can find it. Just go find it. I don't. The problem, Melissa, is that if I release this, you may give me credit, but lots of other people won't. And I have already seen the core slides and graphs that I've done here show up in other organizations without crediting. And I will be honest with you, I'm struggling with this a little bit. And because not everybody is as virtuous and giving credit as you are. And so I will try, because this is a lot of time and money went into this. 30 years of being in the game created this deck. I mean, this is a lot of work, as you can tell. I mean, this is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of intellectual property. And so I've got to figure that out. And I appreciate you raising that. I have released the most important parts of it on our site, which you can pull. And then on Florida, look, I think Florida is a long time project. I mean, I think that if DeSantis is, right now they've got a big advantage over us. DeSantis is a towering figure there. I don't think he's going to be a very good presidential candidate if he's their nominee. I think he went too far MAGA. He's just as MAGA as Trump is. Voters in the battleground are wary of MAGA. They know about MAGA, and he's not going to be able to claim that he's some other kind of Republican. I mean, he's all sorts of MAGA. And so I'm optimistic as I look at the presidential election. Let me close with this. My thoughts about 2024. I think I'd rather be us than them at the presidential level. I think it's likely that the House can be flipped if we have a good election. I think the Senate's going to be really hard. I mean, we've got to defend 3 very tough states in a presidential year. West Virginia, Ohio, and Montana. And there are going to be a lot of other competitive races that we're defending. This is going to be a tough year in the Senate. Doesn't mean we can't keep it, but it's going to be very competitive and very hard. The good news is we have very good candidates, and our campaigns are raising lots of money. And to conclude with this is that, look, the reason I'm so optimistic and the reason I believe that we can win these debates and win the information war and have a good election is because of all of you. I mean, part of my journey in the last 6 months is I've been doing a lot of talks to groups, proud patriots all around the country, people who are knocking on doors, writing postcards, doing all the stuff they do. And all of that work has made us a stronger party. Our party is strong today. We're strong, they're weak. We're united, they're divided. We have muscular, strong campaigns. They struggled with their campaigns and their candidates. We are in a much better position as a family than they are. Their family is tearing itself to pieces every day. We've been a smart governing party. They've been a wild wrecking ball on American politics. And so I want to just conclude by saying that a lot of the sort of angst in our family over the last year, we've got to put that behind us, right? We're strong. We got to be aggressive. We got to go on offense, right? We have done a good job. Joe Biden's been a good president. The country's better off. We've been a far better party. we haven't achieved everything we want. We can't sit here and say that everything is where we want it to be. But are we better because of us? Absolutely. Are the American people better off than they were? Absolutely. Right? Have we done our part and moved America forward and tackled big challenges? Absolutely. Have they repeatedly let us down and not done their part? Absolutely. Have they now been overtaken by extremists and extremism? Absolutely. Right? We need to be more confident and positive about our role, about our party, about our country. I think if we can do that, we will continue to put MAGA, hopefully begin to put MAGA in the rearview mirror, which is what the countries and the world so desperately needs. Thanks everybody so much. Keep up the good work. If you want other people to see this, please share it. It will be on the website later this afternoon. And I present it brand new once a month, and we'll always continue to do that. And send me, in the email you get from Zoom, there's an email address in there for me if you want to send me comments. And I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody who was trying to ask a question. It never works out that way, but maybe next time. Thanks, everybody. Go fight, win, and remember, I'd rather be us than them. Take care.